Francesco Clemente is here. Born in Naples, Italy, he began painting at the age of 12 after seeing Velázquez at the Prado. As a young man, he roamed the world, soaking up images and cultures as he searched for his voice as an artist. He made stops in India and Japan before settling in New York City in the early 1980s. He quickly befriended and collaborated with other contemporaries, including Jean-Michel Basquiat and Andy Warhol. In 1999, the Guggenheim Museum featured a major retrospective of his art. He recently completed portraits of 8 divas who figure prominently in the Metropolitan Opera's 2008-2009 season. This work is on view at the Gallery Met at Lincoln Center through September 26. I am pleased to have Francesco Clemente at this table for the first time. Welcome. Tell me about growing up in Italy and your early life there and how it made you who you are in part today.
Boredom is very important. Boredom is the origin of any good idea. And growing up in Naples in the 1950s, I had many empty afternoons.
And it gave you time to think and to dream and to fantasize and to ask?
I learned to wait. Waiting is also important, to be able to wait. In painting, waiting is a very big part of the effort.
Waiting for what?
Waiting for both the mind and the material to explicitate their narrative, to develop their narrative. Painting is not so much about decision, it's more about acceptance.
Acceptance of what?
Of the fact that certain structures and orders and narratives, they really have their own saying, and all you have to do is to listen.
One of the principal things for an artist is to listen and to be able to hear.
His first album cover, great influence on the development of my work.
It did? How so?
You know, one of those things you see in a young age that really open a door for you.
I tell you what else influenced you. You went to Prado at age 12 and you saw Velázquez.
Yes.
And that said what to you?
That there were things in the world that I had absolutely no understanding of. And this was a very, I think it really was my encounter with suffering in a very early age. I was so heartbroken that I looked at this thing and I really knew that there was absolutely no way I could understand what it was. And at the same time, it had so much physical presence, so much more than anything else around me.
But you were 12. You didn't know or think that you wanted to be a painter.
No, I didn't know. I'm a painter by default. I'm a painter because I really didn't want to be anything else.
So rather than wanting to be a painter, you just didn't want to be anything else?
I didn't want to be anything else, yeah.
Well, you liked something about painting that made you devote your life to it.
Yes, I mean, painting and poetry and form, anything that suggests a sense of completion attracted me always. I always felt a longing for situations that offered a sense of wholeness.
Took you a while to find your voice.
Yeah, I'm slow.
Or procrastinate, one or the other.
Procrastination is a mask to cover my slowness.
Yeah. How does one find his voice as a painter?
You make room. You have to make room. So, and also, I guess making room means you have to be lucky. But to be lucky, you have to make room. If you're always busy, luck can never, find you.
What was it that John Lennon said? Life is what happens while you wait to...
Yes, life is what happens to you as you make other plans. Yeah. Did he write that, or is it a quote from somewhere else?
I think he wrote it.
I never knew this. Yeah.
So you're in Italy, and you have mentors and friends, and you decide to go to India. Why India?
Well, my generation. I'm born in 1952, 16-year-old in 1968. My best friend in school dropped out of school and became an agasadu, who is a wandering ascetic who goes around carrying a big spear, naked.
Yeah.
And
he was your best friend?
He was my friend. And I just went to see what the story was.
Were you at architecture school then?
I went to architectural school, yeah, I did. But again, all I knew is that I really did not want to be part of this, you know, feeding chain of social order. I wanted to break away from the order of things. I wanted to find a spot on the side of the line of social domination, you know.
You were a fierce anti-capitalist at that time?
My generation was. You know, to me I was always very conscious that the deepest human desire is the desire for a narrative. So the Marxism really never really did it to me, for me, because I knew that there was something deeper than that in, you know, the desire for images, the desire for a narrative, the desire for drama. At the end of the day is the strongest thing. There is no hope to have a rational society ever. There is never going to be.
But you think burns deeply in the soul of every man and every woman is a desire to write a narrative?
To have a story,
To
yes.
have a story.
Or to tell a story. First you have to have it and then you can tell it.
Exactly, yeah. or you make it, though. I mean, I tell every graduate and every young person who comes here, you know, you are, have the possibility to create your own narrative and write your own story, and you can be the actor and director and editor and producer, and, you know, because it's your life. And if you don't do that, then you're missing the opportunity to be what you can be. You know. But what's interesting about you so far is that you have been influenced by what you didn't want to be as much as what you wanted to be.
Well, because what I do, again, painting is about light and shadow. I mean, you have to embrace the shadow to be a painter. It's not some, you know, there is a dark side to what I do.
To what you do?
Painting.
Yeah. What's the dark side about?
Well, the ground you walk on is a ground of darkness, really, of things that are really undefined, that don't have a name, that they have no definition. It's very important to consider that ground.
And that ground has to feed you too.
And that ground feeds you and gives legitimacy to what you do. Otherwise, what you do is just culture.
But this is as much about what you, I mean, again, about what you don't know. I mean, it's really, the shadows is not necessarily agony and suffering.
No.
It can just be unknown.
Vagueness, even. Something even more frivolous. Vagueness, forgetfulness. What we are 60% of our time, or maybe more.
Vague. Yeah. So you get in India, you arrive in India, and how does it influence you? And how is the culture there different? And how is the art different?
Well, I know we live in a conservative moment right now, but I think we have to step to rewind before India to a psychedelic window, and to experiences of mortality and experiences of the relativity of myself, of my persona, of the person I thought I was. I went through all of that, you know, through...
Even while you were in India?
Before.
Yeah.
Before. So arriving to India, I arrived to India with this question of, I mean, my persona is a mask. What is it that really is there? I mean, there is nothing there. And I encounter a civilization that, as you know, it's reflecting on this question for
a long time.
A long time.
Now, did you leave there knowing who you were?
No. I left after having a very, not psychedelically induced, just something that just occurred to me. I had a very vivid experience of my mortality. I had the sense, 19 years old, I had this one day I had this very vivid sense that death was there in a very vivid way. It's not some type of rational idea, oh gosh. It was a very physical, vivid experience.
Always one of the possibilities.
And together with that, then psychedelically induced, there was a very vivid experience of the fact that the person I thought I was would disappear. Would disappear with just a change of the chemical situation in my body. This person would just disappear entirely. So this left me questioning.
Did you go from there to Japan, or did you go from...
No, this comes later. The 70s are in India, on and off, and then at the end of the 70s, I traveled to America through Japan.
Yeah, that's what I meant. You went... Here's what's interesting. You come to America, and immediately you are part of a group of people that are huge in American culture. Andy Warhol, for example, Allen Ginsberg, for example, and you could name many more. How did that happen? Shared interest, passion, all of a sudden you're hanging with them.
Well, you know, all the while with all the India and all the dreams and all the esoteric literature, I was working. I made things through the 70s.
Yeah.
And the artists of my generation here in America, they looked at these things and they were aware of these things. And so really the people who opened the door to me when I arrived in New York were the artists of my generation.
Mm.
They were also the artists who were looking back at the previous generation and considering and embracing things that, you know, now to say Warhol, everyone knows it's cool, it's okay. But there was a moment where not everyone knew it was okay. And a lot of people doubt, you know, they had doubts. And my generation embraced artists like Warhol and others.
Basquiat and others who were there.
So, you know, artists at that time really gave legitimacy to each other, which is really the way it is.
Because you've said one interesting thing about art, about your own work. You care most about what your peers and your contemporaries think about it, more than the audience, more than anyone else.
Because
the critic that matters the most are the artist, fellow artist.
Yes, because number one, they're competent, and number two, at the end of the day, they're the ones who are going to be there, you know. Everything else changes, but the people who are involved in the same questions, they're always going to be there.
Warhol was a mentor.
He was definitely a very, very, very generous and very, and very entertaining person, I have to say.
You like both ends, the social end and the creative end.
Yes, because the social was more of a you know, fiction than reality. He was really very much on his own a lot of time, at least in that period. Maybe earlier in the 70s.
Tell me about that, but that's fascinating to me. I mean, because Andy Warhol is one of those figures now, you know, considered a giant of 20th century art.
He is. But he also was very clever to disguise his talents, you know. He made it always, you know.
As if he was simply...
Yeah, everything was happening by accident.
And it wasn't. He labored over the ideas.
That's a very intelligent way to present yourself without creating too much conflict.
What makes him as good as he is, considered to be?
Color.
Color.
The color is good.
But what about finding something in the commonplace and making it art?
Yes.
But it was a color.
That is good too. But the object is good, you know.
What influence did he have on you?
What you mentioned, commonplace, the idea that you can embrace a notion that is just there for everyone and make it your own and make it alive. Yeah.
During the 80s, where would you put that in your artistic life? A defining time?
Not necessarily. I just don't think that way. I think more in terms of of this. I don't like so much, but it's not just when I think about my itinerary, but just in general, I don't like to think in terms of linear time. I like to think about just a space with objects in it, and you really go back and forth from one object to another in time, but it's not a development like that. But certainly from the obscurity of the 70s to the enthusiasm of those 3-4 years in the early 80s, that was definitely an event in my life, and a surprising and exhilarating event, no
Interesting
doubt.
you mentioned the 70s and the 80s, because some people in the film business romanticize about the 70s as the great time of film, whether it was a Godfather or a whole range of other movies came forward then. And you had people like Spielberg finding his way, and Francis Ford Coppola and so many others, really people who made film. They were filmmakers, not... and the 80s has this reputation, certainly in New York, of producing all these artists, and it was a time of ferment and recognition. Is that oversold?
I think the most interesting time is always now.
I do too.
Honestly, who cares? I mean, really, and yes, there were 30 after hours in Manhattan in 1983. Did that make it a better city? If you were awake after 3 o'clock, yes.
Okay. You say the best time is today, yet you also recognize, you say you did a series of self-portraits, and you all of a sudden realized something you hadn't thought about, that you were a middle-aged man.
Yes.
So I'm putting those two ideas together. I mean, this is the best time of your life?
Yes.
Because?
Because my emotions are all still there, but they're almost like a river who dug into the ground a bit, so they don't run on the surface all over the place. They're just running underneath your view of the horizon, but they're there and they're stronger than ever, but they don't disturb my horizon, and it's a very pleasant situation to be in.
At the end of the day, are they going to think of you primarily as a portrait painter?
That would be interesting, but
Well,
no.
you don't think of yourself that way, do you?
No.
But
It's
you
not
know
gonna
that
be
you are
like that.
compared frequently to people, who have defined portrait painting.
Well, there are two elements of discussion here. One is, yes, I am a procrastinator, and so I've never been in a rush to really put on the table what is it that I'm doing. I'd rather wait and find out what it is as late as possible.
Okay.
So this is as far as the strategy of my work goes. And in terms of portrait, I think I'm so surprised and exhilarated by the fact that there is this interest in my portraits, which are unusual for our time because they're not based on photography. So they're not based on the moment. They're based on this total view, which is unusual at this moment, to look at people in a sort of total way. That's not is not done.
Whenever I hear you say that, it reminds me, and I'm sure everyone else, of that often quoted line about Gertrude Stein and Picasso, when she said to Picasso, "But it's not me, and it doesn't look like me."
It will.
It will. Which means you have to see the total person to be able to see that.
Well, and more important, you have to believe that there is such a thing as the total person, which is not a common assumption nowadays.
You've said also it makes you physically ill if you can't paint.
It does. Painting is a physical, it's manual labor, among other things.
Tell me about that, because that fascinates me, because I believe that about art. It's manual labor.
No, I don't want to make it into that it has to be manual labor.
No,
but in my case it is. And I found out in a very, actually, moving way. Only 2 years ago, I made a very large fresco in a museum in Europe, and the building was under construction, and there was a lot of workers who were building the thing. And really I saw how much respect they had for the fact that I was staying up late in the night and do these things with my hands, and how much this really meant something to them. And this really made it very real for me that what I do is also manual labor. Until then it was a notion in my head, it didn't matter. Now I know.
It's one of the important, I mean, it's as simple as it is, it's one of the things that doing this I have learned, how it is just that for so many artists, whether they're writers or painters or musicians. It's getting up and doing it. I mean, you can wait for all the muses in the world, and you have to in certain ways, but once you even have that, it's a construct.
Simenon sweat.
Sweat.
Remember they say when Simenon wrote those detective novels, he was sweating.
You paint women well.
I do.
Why is that?
In my beloved Hindu mythology language, Shiva, who is the male deity, without Shakti, who is the female deity, is a corpse. You need that energy to put everything in motion. So I have a good relation with whatever female energy there is in the world. I embrace, I see it everywhere, I look for it everywhere, and I really, my force comes from there.
Are you more curious about women than you are about men?
No, I'm interested in men, in their complicated simplicity.
Yeah, right, in all of that, yeah.
But I do believe women more intelligent, because I believe, to me, intelligence is flexibility and inclusiveness, and I think the intelligence of women is more flexible and inclusive than men. Men are always building a castle. I'm more interested in bridges.
You've said that before, bridges to...
From one world to the next.
From
a
one
bridge outside
to
of the art world into another world, a bridge
next.
from the east to the west, a bridge from the poor to the rich. Bridges.
Yeah. You also incorporate craftspeople into your work, the work of craftsmen.
I did. That's part, and it has to do with the idea that none of us is really one person. We are sort of a collection of people. And so if you accept that idea, then also the separation between you and the other becomes weaker. You know, at the end, you think of yourself not only as a collection of people, but also as the result of all the people around you, and it's easier to communicate and cooperate.
The other thing I'm fascinated by you is the use of the word and the metaphor space. I mean, bridges connect space. You know, I mean, space and shadow, all of that has to do with space, a word that sort of comes easy to you. America is about space and frontier.
Big space, big horizon. So wonderful. Driving non-stop from LA to New Orleans. I did that last year.
And
I stopped, but...
But you drove. I mean, you drove continually, stopped to eat and sleep, and then kept driving.
I drove.
And what did you see?
Oh, what did I hear? The music stations are so good.
Oh, really?
And as you get closer to New Orleans...
When you go through Memphis, you hear a lot of rhythm and blues, and when you get to New Orleans, you hear jazz.
And I arrived to New Orleans on John Coltrane's birthday, so there was 48 hours of Coltrane at the radio. Heaven.
Yeah. What musician has influenced you the most in terms of sort of, you think, both in terms of enjoyment and in perhaps a connection to your work?
I listen to Neil Young still, and I listen to Bob Dylan, and I listen to Miles Davis. I think what I do has a lot, has that, I have an interest for that, you know, specific, the ability to have a really specific emotional pitch, you know, put together a work that really has a very specific emotional pitch, that is that pitch. I love that.
Speaking of America, how do you see things in your work that you think were influenced by 9/11? Because it had such a profound impact where you live?
Yes, I live a few blocks from there. I had an exhibition in New York where I thought that every painting was actually iconographically a reference, and I was worried that it was too explicit, and no one
made the connection
at all. But I think someone should really do an exhibition of paintings related to, of works of art related to 9/11 before and after. Find all the works that anticipated it.
Oh, that's a great idea. All the works that anticipated 9/11?
Anticipated it. Images that somehow anticipated it and afterwards. It's possible. I've seen few things around that really are that, you know.
When they did the retrospective, speaking of all that, when they did a retrospective of you at the Guggenheim, of your work, did you learn something about yourself when you see the continuum? Because a lot of artists...
It was wonderful to see the work in that space. I was very close to a great, great composer, Morton Feldman.
Yes.
And he always used to say about paintings that they should have high visibility. They should be, you know, when you're close, intimacy and detail, but when you are 1 mile away, visibility. And in that room, you really had, this is the Rotonda of the Guggenheim.
Oh, yeah, it goes.
You really have both views. You can have the intimate and the...
And the continuum.
And the continuum, and also the far distance.
Yeah.
So it's a room that really...
So it really is a great place to exhibit art, and because it has that long circular...
I think it is. And also, it's not circular. It's a spiral.
No, a spiral. I mean, yes, exactly.
It opens up.
But what did you find out things about yourself that you hadn't seen, maybe? I mean, when you...
Well...
Who did that? Lisa Dennison?
Lisa Dennison was the curator, yes. And Tom Krantz,
Tom Krantz was the director of the Guggenheim. But did you come out of that saying, I see where I came from, I see where I'm going, I have a context that maybe I hadn't thought about?
That happens every day, though. But of course, for a painter to have the privilege to see again many objects that you can't see for years was great. But every time you do a new work, you're changing the context of everything you've done up to that moment.
You work fast, though, once you start.
Again, because I have to be close to my emotional pitch of that moment. But many painters work fast. Most painters work fast.
They do?
Yeah. Including the ones you would never think they work fast, like someone like Agnes Martin. Those paintings are made in a day.
Yours are too.
If I'm lucky, yes. I'm not always lucky.
I can't imagine, I know painters do this, to leave the painting, the canvas at night, and come back in the morning and say, oh no, and erase what you've done, or paint over it.
Well, I'm not a builder. My temperament is not building, is erasing, and so...
You don't do that?
I don't do that, really. I do a lot of editing before I when I establish what I'm going to do. That's when the editing happens. Not once I work.
Oh, so you do the editing before you start painting. Once you start painting, it's Katie bar the door.
Once I start painting, I let go.
Well, what's the longest painting you ever painted? How long did it take you?
Oh no, I've worked for 2 years on certain works. Everything has its exceptions.
Yeah, but mostly it's fast.
Mostly it's fast.
Are there things you haven't completed that are still underway?
That's a very scary thought, I'm sure.
Before we look at what's going on with the Sopranos, tell me about you and Cy Twombly.
A very, very, very elegant man, and a bit extravagant, walking in the opposite direction of me every day on Via Monserrato in Rome. I'm in my early 20s, he's in his 40s, and he is a neoclassical painter who somehow is able to give life to things in antiquity that seem not to have any life anymore for someone like me who is grown in Italy, you know. And in fact, once I wrote I was on a small panel about Cy Twombly's work, and I said that his relation to antiquity was to an antiquity as it is described by this Italian writer Savigno, who says that Greece is the country of the goat and of the monkey. You know, not the Greece of the Germans or Marlborough.
Yeah, right.
It's the monkey and the goat. And Twombly was very happy that I said that, because what it means is that he relates with something that is alive.
Mm. He actually used Italy's classical heritage as well as its mythology.
But really as a living force, not as an exercise in, you know, archaeology.
Mm. Close friend?
No.
Just...
I can say that I'm always reluctant to be too close to the people I admire, and at that time I really admired him very much. I would never dream to try to be close.
And you were very young at that time, weren't you?
I was very young, and I had done nothing. I didn't really want to be close at all.
You felt you weren't deserving of being close?
No, I thought I was getting it, so why ask for more? I mean, I understood what he was doing, and again, at that time, not everyone did.
Maybe that was part of the connection.
It's nice to think that you're one of the few in any department. Yeah. Today is very rare to be in that condition.
Okay, sopranos, we're going to take a look at this. I'm going to see the images. Tell me about this. How did it come about? Why are you painting these divas who will be performing in the 2008-2009 season?
I've been making commission portraits. I've been making portraits of friends that, again, I admire, mostly writers, poets, painters, singers. And
so why not?
As in New York, as it happens in New York, one thing led to another. And finally, Dodi Kazanjan, who is curating a season of exhibitions at the Metropolitan Opera, asked me to do something there and asked me to do portraits of the great sopranos of the next season. Okay, let's take a look at some of these. I mean, this is the first one. Tell me who the first one is. Can you see it over here? Oh, Diana Damrau. Right. It's Gilda. Yes. Tell me about her. Tell me about what you saw, and tell me about this portrait. Well, first of all the portraits, in all the portraits, the singers, they're wearing the costume of the opera. Yeah. And when I did the first one, was Carita Mattali, I got a phone call that moved me very, very much, that her office called my studio, and they said, and she's going to play Salome in the next season. Right. And they asked, Carita wants to know, tomorrow is Francesco painting Carita or Salome? And these women really are obsessed with the stage, even more than the voice, you know, and they love to be these other people, you know. Natalie Dessay especially is obsessed with the stage. Yeah, each one of them told me something that was very moving. Diana Damrau, I asked her, I said, you look you feel very young. Are you young? And she said, no, I'm not that young, but, you know, I'm happy. And this, you know, is rare to hear that these days. Are you happy? Am I happy? I feel pretty good right now here, yes. Obviously, I didn't mean here. I meant the larger context of where you are with your work and your life and your future and where you have, the journey you've traveled. Yes, the journey is open and the door is open. But, you know, every day you have to make sure the door is open. So, what do you worry about? I worry about clinging. I worry about, you know, there are moments of balance and moments of where really you are in a state of grace, but if you cling, it's over. So it's really a very narrow path to let the narrative of life unfold gracefully without stopping it, without clinging, without attachment, without making it die on you. So it's the hardest thing in the world for people to do, because they don't want to give up what has been, especially those... It's easy to leave behind what's bad, but to leave behind what's good is harder.
Take a look at the next one. This is, as I said, this is Natalie Dessay as Amina.
Lovely theatrical
God, I love her.
presence, yes. And I asked her, I'm obsessed, there is a writer from the 30s, there was a writer in Paris, René Daumal, who had a project. He wanted to ask all the great artists of that time, who were all in Paris, what their turning point in their life had been, how they'd become artists. And so I didn't really ask this to Natalie, but I asked her. I asked all of them how, when did you know? And she said that she really wanted to be a ballerina. And then when she realized she couldn't be a ballerina, she wanted to be an actress. And then when she realized she couldn't be an actress, she wanted to be a singer. So
She told me the same thing, sitting where you did. She really wanted exactly that. I mean, singing was her last choice. Even today, I think she'd rather have become an actor.
Another artist by default, like
yeah,
me.
Exactly. But see, what's interesting is that you ask the same questions that all of us are interested in. Tell me about inflection points. Tell me who shaped your life. I mean, we are all interested in our narrative and everyone else's narrative. And what we hope artists do, is capture that. Capture the idea of a narrative that we all understand from, because it speaks to us.
And it's not only a narrative, it's also a form, because there are narratives of power, there are narratives of violence, there are narratives of greed, but these are narratives that are a little easier to digest.
Next one is Renee Fleming.
And this is very interesting for me because it's Thais, but I did, a couple of years ago, I did another portrait of her, not in costume. And if you compare the two, it's very interesting how different they are.
How so?
Here she's much more forceful and fierce. And in real life, she's a wonderful, she has a wonderful tempo. You know how some people have the right tempo?
Yeah, right.
The way they move and talk and think.
Tempo and rhythm.
So nice.
Yeah. Okay, let's look at one last of these, and we'll cover a few paintings of your own career. Tell me what this is.
Angela Giorgio.
Yeah, it's Magda.
Very dramatic presence. She was supposed to have a wig for her costume, but her hair was so dramatic and full of
her eyes are that big.
Life.
I mean, really.
And
the first thing you see.
We got along well.
I think you get along well with all women, don't you? It's the artist in you.
According to Woody Allen, is the pasta, remember, in the movie.
All right, this is Cymbeline, painted in 1977.
Yes.
A period in which you were doing drawings.
Accumulation. I made thousands and thousands of line drawings, very rough, like this one. So a time of, again, I have to talk in terms of space, right. Defining my territory. And this is a drawing about the actual original meaning of Cymbeline, which was a coin that two friends would break and keep to remember each other.
Next is Map of What is Effortless, 1978.
A work made in collaboration with poster painters who did the big advertising for Bollywood films.
Yeah. Next one, Self-Portrait with a Bird, 1980.
One of the earliest ones of this disturbingly eroticized self-portraits.
Eroticism speaks to you too.
As a metaphor of spirituality.
As a metaphor of spirituality?
Yes.
You get that in India or Italy?
Of course, in front of those obscene temples in India.
Okay. She and She, 1982.
Tenderness, skin, touch, the continuation of the body into the line of drawing.
Sky, 1984.
Abstraction, figure, cosmic forces, personal fears.
Personal fears.
We all have fears.
We do?
Oh, yeah.
And yours are?
the ones prescripted in the canon: fear of death,
Yeah.
fear of old age, fear of illness.
Yes.
Is one of the Four Noble Truths.
And how about the fear of losing your talent? It could be
Yes.
because of all those things,
Yes.
but it also could be from something else.
Yes, that is always present, every day.
Because that's what you live for, your talent.
I wouldn't call it talent, but I would call it my language,
Okay.
the privilege of being able to tell my story.
Next one is Seed, 1991.
Again, human body as boundary, human body as enlightenment, growth, protection. Always, traveling around these sort of forces in our life that don't really have a name or a place to, in consciousness.
Self-Portrait with Allen Ginsberg.
I miss Alan so much.
He did a
I
great
really,
show with me.
Really, really miss him so much. Because he was the bravest, and really this word compassion, that everybody throws around. He really had a compassionate mind to be able to turn around every situation into a useful situation, into a generous situation. I really miss him so much.
You don't see his like around.
Everyone is that person, that's it. But these qualities are there, yes. They're there. They're there in, in numberless people, but he was close to me, it's different.
Albert, 1997.
My wife, who was on the phone with me, and the first portrait in this format I did.
Yeah.
And she was on the phone with me yesterday, and I told her I was coming here. She said, "Oh, you're going to Charlie Rose, that's nice, but please, Francesco, just don't talk too much, huh?" We are married for 32 years, and I don't need to explain why.
I have no idea what she meant. House of Cards, 2001.
September 11.
September 11. Tell me about it.
About September 11? About what? About the painting?
Yeah.
A very fluid, a very fluid situation, let's put it that way.
Tandori Satori, 2003.
Contemplative traditions, in this case Vajrayana Buddhism, the idea of sunyata, emptiness, as interdependence of all things.
And finally, Self-Portrait, 2005.
Vulnerability, the ideal state of a painter. To be vulnerable. You have to cultivate it.
The exhibition The Sopranos will be on view at the Gallery Met until September 26, 2008. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Tell her you did not talk too much.